Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going to be exploring how a journey to a fantastical land can change how we see the world. We've got two versions of a story, one from a book and one from a YouTube video transcript. Both are about this mysterious painter known only as Anonymous. So before we jump into all of that, tell me, what was it that first really intrigued you about Anonymous and this journey?
Yeah, you know what really captured my imagination was that a simple cottage could transform into this vessel for such a profound voyage. It makes you think of the potential for transformation that's hidden within even the most mundane things in our lives.
That's a really great point, and you're so right. Both of these sources really emphasize the symbolic nature of this journey he goes on. It's not just that he's traveling to a far-off land. He's like embarking on an internal exploration. And his story begins in a pretty ordinary setting, a little cottage on the ocean, but then we meet this radiant maiden Levity, and she whisks him away to Tir na Nog, the land of youth, and that's when things start to get really interesting. His cottage doesn't just stay put, it transforms into the ship, complete with a fence-like railing and spherical lamps. It's like home becomes this vessel carrying him towards something new and unknown. What do you make of that transformation?
That's interesting. Well, I think it suggests that home isn't just a physical space. You know what I mean? It's more like a state of being,
Yeah,
a foundation from which we can launch into the unknown,
yeah.
and the fence-like railing. That could symbolize those boundaries or the structures we create for ourselves. And maybe the spherical lamps represent that illumination or knowledge that helps guide us on our path.
I really like that. It's like he's venturing into this completely uncharted territory, but he's not just totally adrift. There's still some structure and some guidance. It makes me think about how we approach the unknown in our own lives. Are we clinging to the shore, or are we ready to just set sail, even if we have to face uncertainty? And speaking of uncharted territory, Tir na Nog itself is described as this idyllic realm filled with eternal blossoms and just timeless beauty. It's almost like a representation of a heightened state of consciousness, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Tiranogue is like a metaphor for enlightenment. It's where Anonymous encounters wisdom in these unexpected forms.
And talk about unexpected forms. These six creatures are bizarre. We've got a seal manatee covered in intricate markings, an anteater sifting through what they call spiritual clutter, a bat that seems to like the darkness, an alligator with scales like gears and pulleys, an eagle carrying these unsettling shapes, and a majestic lion chimera. Where do we even begin with these guys?
Well, let's start with that seal manatee. It's described as having markings that depict entire ecosystems and stories from history, all woven into its skin. What do you think is the message there?
Yeah, it's like this walking, swimming tapestry of all of history. It makes you realize how much we don't know, all the stories that have unfolded before us, and how our own experiences are just like this tiny little thread in this huge tapestry of existence.
Right. Each individual, each species has its own unique and valuable history. It's a reminder to approach life with humility and a sense of wonder.
Absolutely. So then we have the anteater, meticulously sifting through what the sources call spiritual clutter. Do you think this is a metaphor for our own internal journeys? Learning to filter out the noise and just find inner peace.
Absolutely. The anteater represents mindfulness, that practice of slowing down, paying attention, and understanding what really matters. In a world where we are just overflowing with information and stimuli, the anteater's focused foraging is a reminder to cultivate inner stillness.
That's so relevant. We're always bombarded with notifications and news. It's exhausting. Any suggestions for how our listeners can channel their inner anteater and just cultivate more focus?
Well, you can start by incorporating small mindfulness practices into your day, even just 10 minutes each morning dedicated to a focused activity. You could try meditation, journaling, or even just enjoying a cup of tea without checking your phone, with no distractions.
I like it. Simple but powerful. Okay, what about the bat? I find it interesting that both sources portray it as this guide through darkness, but not in like a scary, spooky way. Could this be about learning to navigate uncertainty, finding comfort when we can't see what's ahead?
Exactly. The bat, with its echolocation, is teaching us to trust our instincts, our gut feelings, and navigate the unknown with confidence.
Hmm.
We can learn to see in the dark, to find our way even when we don't know the destination.
So it's about embracing the unknown instead of being afraid of it. That's powerful. But what about the alligator? It seems to represent a different kind of wisdom altogether, right? I mean, it's got scales that look like gears and pulleys.
It really does.
Hmm.
I think the alligator is encouraging us to look beyond the surface and to really try and understand how the universe works. Like gears and pulleys working together in this complex system, everything is connected. And understanding those connections can empower us to navigate life with more wisdom.
Wow, that's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. So it's not about just acquiring more knowledge, it's about seeing the bigger picture. But then we have this eagle soaring above it all, carrying these unsettling shapes. Human faces, scattered bones, cryptic runes. It seems pretty dark, right? Could this be a hint that everything changes, that nothing lasts forever?
Absolutely. The eagle embodies the Buddhist concept of impermanence. Nothing lasts forever, and if we cling to things that are fleeting, it only leads to suffering.
That's a hard lesson, but an important one. How do we learn to accept change and let go of the things that we can't control?
It starts by recognizing that change is the only constant. By cultivating mindfulness, we can become more present to the ebb and flow of life. Appreciate each moment for what it is without clinging to it or wishing it were different.
So true. And last but not least, there's this lion chimera, this fusion of different animals, majestic and a little bit grotesque. Could this be a representation of how fluid identity is, like the Buddhist idea of no self?
That's a really astute observation. It does seem to challenge our notions of fixed identity. Just as the lion chimera is a composite of different creatures, our identities are fluid, multifaceted, and interconnected with the larger web of existence.
That's pretty profound. We're not just these fixed, unchanging things, right? So we've got these six creatures, each embodying this piece of wisdom that can help us navigate life's complexities. But then Anonymous decides to return to the old world, and things take this dramatic turn. He's warned by Levity that time has passed differently, but he doesn't seem to remember her warning and ends up aging rapidly the moment he sets foot back on familiar ground. What do you think about that sudden shift?
It really is a pivotal moment. It makes us think about time, memory, and the consequences of our choices. What are your initial thoughts on his decision to go back and his rapid aging?
It's almost like a cautionary tale, don't you think? Like a reminder that you can't escape the consequences of your actions, even if you've been to a realm beyond time. What was it about the old world that made him want to go back so badly? What was he looking for? We'll have to explore those questions further when we come back in the next part of our deep dive. So we're back, and we're ready to delve a little deeper into Anonymous's return to the old world and that wisdom that he brought back with him. I'm still thinking about why he decided to leave Tir na Nog and what he might have been looking for when he went back to a world where time had moved on without him.
Yeah, it is a real turning point in the story, isn't it? Maybe he felt like he had to share that knowledge he gained, or maybe he just missed what was familiar, even though he knew it would cost him. What about his decision really stands out to you?
I think it says a lot about what it means to be human, that pull between wanting to grow and wanting to just be comfortable. He saw something amazing in Tir na Nog, but maybe some part of him still wanted the world he knew, even if it meant getting old. But before we go too far down that road, I want to go back to those creatures he brought back. They each seem to hold a key to figuring out life's complexities. Can we go over their symbolism one more time?
Of course. Let's start with the seal manatee. Remember, its markings represented how everything's connected. If we think about that in our own lives, what kind of impact do we want to have on the world? If everything we do ripples outward, what kind of legacy do we want to leave behind?
Whoa, that's a big question to think about. Makes you realize that every choice, every action has consequences that go way beyond just us. It reminds me to really think about my actions and be mindful of the impact I have on others and the world.
Exactly. And speaking of mindfulness, that anteater sifting through all that spiritual clutter encourages us to be just as mindful in our own lives. How can we be more like the anteater in our daily routines and not get overwhelmed by all the information that's out there?
It's like we're constantly bombarded with things fighting for our attention, right? Social media, emails, the news. Maybe it's about setting boundaries, taking time to reflect, and learning to focus on what really matters. It's like we need to curate our own mental space.
You got it. And just like that anteater doesn't give up when it has to sift through all that stuff to find food, we can't give up on filtering through distractions to find what truly nourishes our minds and spirits.
Hmm.
Okay, now how about the bat, that guide through darkness? How can we use the bat's wisdom when we feel lost and uncertain?
The bat reminds us that it's okay to not have all the answers. It's about trusting your gut and navigating the unknown with confidence. We can find our way even when we can't see where we're going.
Exactly. It's like the bat uses echolocation to map out its surroundings even when it's dark. We can develop our own inner compass to sense our way through uncertainty. All right, let's shift gears a bit. The alligator. Remember those scales that look like gears and pulleys? Such a powerful symbol of how intricate the universe is.
It makes me think about how everything is connected, how everything works together, from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy. What can we learn from the alligator about being curious and wanting to understand how things work?
It's about asking questions, seeking knowledge, and looking beyond what we see on the surface. It's about recognizing patterns, understanding cause and effect, and appreciating how complex the systems that govern our world really are.
I love that. It's like we're all on this lifelong journey of learning and expanding our understanding of the universe and our place in it. It also ties back to what we were talking about before, how our actions have ripple effects. If we understand how things are connected, we can make better choices about how we impact the world around us.
That's such a good point. We're not isolated. We're all part of this larger system, and understanding that can help us live more responsibly and create positive change. Now, let's talk about the eagle. Its flight is so majestic, but then you've got those images of mortality, the faces, bones, runes, a pretty stark reminder that nothing lasts forever.
It really makes you think, how can we enjoy the beauty and preciousness of life while also accepting that it's all temporary? How do we reconcile the joy of living with the fact that everything eventually fades?
The eagle teaches us that accepting impermanence isn't about focusing on loss or being negative. It's about appreciating every single moment, recognizing that each experience, each relationship, each breath is a gift.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. We need to
Yeah.
be grateful for what we have now while letting go of our attachment to things that are always changing. And that makes me think about that last creature, the lion chimera, that symbol of how fluid our identity is.
Right. It challenges us to let go of fixed ideas of who we are and to accept that identity is always changing. Our sense of self is constantly evolving, molded by our experiences and interactions with the world.
So we're not fixed, we're a collection of stories, experiences, and connections. Maybe that's the most beautiful and liberating part of this whole story. But going back to Anonymous returning to the old world, he brought those creatures with him, remember? Why do you think he released them into a world that might not understand or appreciate them?
A good question. Maybe Anonymous knew that these creatures had wisdom that could help humanity, even if people didn't understand them at first. It's like an act of faith, believing that their message would eventually reach those who were ready for it.
I love that. It's like he's emphasizing how important it is to share knowledge and pass on wisdom, even when we don't know what the outcome will be, like a legacy, ensuring that the lessons we learn keep spreading.
Exactly. It reminds me of those missing paintings, the ones he created in Tir Nog but decided to keep hidden. What do you think about his choice to not share those with the world?
It's almost like he's encouraging us to keep searching, to find our own understanding of the wisdom those creatures represent. Like he's saying, I've shown you the way, now it's your turn to find your own path.
Maybe those missing paintings are like hidden knowledge, waiting for those who are willing to dig deeper, look beyond the surface, and connect with the story on a personal level.
And maybe that's the real message of this whole journey, that seeking wisdom is a process, a lifelong adventure that requires us to be curious, open-minded, and willing to embrace the unknown. What are your final thoughts on that?
Wow, we've talked about so much in this deep dive. We've gone from a transforming cottage to these amazing creatures and even explored ideas about time and identity. As we wrap up our exploration of Anonymous and his journey, what are your overall thoughts on this whole story? What really stands out to you? You know, what really strikes me is just how powerful myths and symbols are. Both the book and the YouTube video take these elements of ancient storytelling and combine them with modern philosophical concepts. It's like they're creating this whole new mythology for our time, a mythology that speaks to that human need to find meaning in a world that feels so chaotic.
You're so right. It's not just about finding meaning, though. It's about how we navigate all that uncertainty. We talked about the six companions as guides, each giving us a different perspective on how to live a good life. But how do we actually take that wisdom and use it in our everyday lives? How do we move beyond just understanding the ideas and actually put them into practice?
That's the tricky part, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's easy to understand interconnectedness in theory, but much harder to actually live it, to make choices that reflect that understanding.
Exactly. So how do we bridge that gap?
Well, I think it starts with making conscious choices, even small ones. Like when you're eating, you could stop and think about where your food came from. Realize how much work and resources went into putting it on your table. Or before you buy something, think about the impact it had on the environment. Even these little choices can have big consequences.
So it's about bringing that awareness into everything we do, not just when we're specifically thinking about it.
Exactly. And the same goes for mindfulness, like the anteater. It's not just something you do for 10 minutes in the morning. It's about finding those moments of stillness throughout the day, even if it's just for a few breaths.
Can you give us an example? Like what could that look like?
Sure, imagine you're at work and you're feeling super stressed. Instead of letting it take over, take a second to just notice your breath. Feel your chest rising and falling, the air going in and out. It's simple, but it can create a little bit of peace in the middle of all that chaos.
That makes sense. It's about making those practices a part of our lives, not just separate things we do sometimes.
Exactly. And think about the bat's wisdom about embracing uncertainty. It doesn't mean looking for chaos, but learning how to deal with those ups and downs that are just a part of life.
Right, so instead of fighting change or trying to control everything, we practice going with the flow and trust that even when things are uncertain, there's something guiding us.
I like that. And it reminds me of the alligator, with those scales like gears and pulleys. There are so many forces at work that we might not understand, systems that are way more complex than we can imagine.
It's a good reminder to stay humble, isn't it? To accept that we don't know everything and approach life with a sense of wonder and curiosity.
Absolutely. And with that humility, the eagle reminds us to remember that everything changes. It's not about ignoring death or loss. It's about understanding that change is just part of life.
Yeah, it's about appreciating each moment because we know it won't last forever, but that doesn't make it any less important.
I agree. And finally, that lion chimera with its mixed up form reminds us that there's no one right way to be. Our identities are fluid, and that's okay.
We're not fixed. We're a collection of all these different stories and experiences and relationships. Maybe that's the most beautiful part of it all.
I think you've got it. This whole story, with all its fantasy and symbolism, points us back to ourselves. It's like an invitation to go on our own journeys of self-discovery and embrace the mystery of it all.
And maybe that's why Anonymous chose to keep his paintings of Tir na Nog a secret. He's letting us find our own meaning, our own path to wisdom.
It's a powerful invitation. The story reminds us that the journey itself is what matters, that the pursuit of wisdom never really ends, and the most important discoveries often come from within.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it interesting and thought-provoking, and that you come away with a renewed sense of wonder about the world and your place in it. Until next time, keep exploring.